Warden Grix's claws clicked against his desk in what could generously be called amusement, though the sound resembled grinding metal more than anything approaching joy. The human prisoner designation Beth Carter, according to her file, had been assigned to stone quarry duty, which was basically the facility's way of saying, "We're going to work you until your fragile little bones snap like twigs." Brilliant strategy, he muttered to his aide, a fidgety creature named Tim, whose species had the charming habit of molting when nervous. Let's see how long the mighty human spirit lasts when faced with genuine manual labor. Through his office window, Grix watched Beth Carter being escorted toward the quarry by two guards who looked like they could bench press a small starship. She was tiny compared to them, maybe 5.5 feet tall, built like a twig that might break in a stiff breeze. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the standard-issue prison coveralls that made everyone look like walking laundry. "Sir," Tim ventured, his scales already starting to flake with anxiety. "The betting pools are heavily weighted toward complete physical collapse within 4 hours." 4 hours? Grix's mandibles spread in what passed for a grin among his species. "That's generous. I give her 2. Maximum. Humans are notoriously weak when it comes to actual physical endurance." The Korvan detention facility prided itself on breaking the spirits of problem prisoners through good, old-fashioned, hard labor. The stone quarry was their crown jewel, a massive pit where inmates hauled chunks of granite from the excavation site to the processing center, one backbreaking load at a time. Most species lasted about a week before they started begging for lighter assignments. Humans, according to all available data, were supposed to be even more fragile than most. "Any special considerations for the human?" Tim asked, consulting his datapad with nervous efficiency. "Standard protocol," Grix replied, settling back in his chair to enjoy the entertainment. 50 pounds of stone per trip, minimum 20 trips per day. If she can't meet quota, she doesn't eat. Simple mathematics. Beth Carter reached the quarry entrance and paused to look around. Even from his office window, Grix could see her taking inventory of the situation, the depth of the pit, the distance to the processing area, the weight of the stone chunks scattered around the excavation site. She nodded once, like she was confirming something to herself, and started down the steep path. "Confident little thing, isn't she?" "Yeah," Grix observed. "I almost feel sorry for her. Almost." The first load went about as expected. Beth selected a reasonable-sized chunk of granite, maybe 45 pounds or so, and hoisted it onto her shoulder with visible effort. The walk back up the quarry path was slow but steady, and she deposited the stone at the processing station without collapsing. "See?" Grix pointed at the screen. "Classic human overconfidence. She thinks she can maintain that pace all day." But something strange happened on her second trip down into the quarry. A small group of Korvan cubs youngsters from the facility staff's family housing had gathered near the quarry's edge to watch the new prisoner work. They were maybe 3 feet tall, covered in soft gray fur, with the oversized eyes and clumsy movements typical of their age group. "What are those little disasters doing near a work zone?" Grix demanded. "It's their play area, sir," Tim replied nervously. "The cubs usually build sand castles and chase each other around while their parents work. They've never shown interest in the prisoners before." Beth seemed to notice the cubs watching her. She waved at them, actually waved, like she was greeting neighbors at a social gathering instead of acknowledging alien youngsters while hauling rocks in a prison quarry. The cubs waved back enthusiastically, their little paws paddling the air with obvious excitement. "Adorable," Grix said dryly. "She's making friends. That'll last until the real exhaustion sets in." On her third trip, Beth picked up a slightly smaller stone, maybe 35 pounds, and started back up the path. But this time, one of the cubs scrambled down into the quarry and picked up a pebble the size of a marble. The little creature followed Beth up the path, carrying its tiny contribution with obvious pride. "That's unusual," Tim admitted, his scales shedding faster now. "Cubs don't typically engage with prisoners." "It's a fluke," Grix dismissed. "The little one will get bored and wander off." But the cub didn't wander off. It deposited its pebble next to Beth's stone at the processing station, looked up at her expectantly, and chirped something in the high-pitched tones that Korvan youngsters used when they were pleased with themselves. Beth laughed, actually laughed. like the sound of someone genuinely amused rather than someone slowly dying of exhaustion, and said something to the cub in her strange human language. The universal translator rendered it as, "Thank you for helping me, little one. That's very kind." The cub's eyes went wide with delight, and it scampered back toward the quarry for another helping trip. "Sir," Tim said quietly, "I think we might have a situation developing." By Beth's fifth trip, 3 cubs were following her up and down the quarry path, each carrying stones that ranged from pebble size to maybe 2 pounds. They chattered constantly in their young voices, asking questions that the translator interpreted as variations of, "Are we helping? Is this good? Do you like our stones?" Beth answered every single question with patience and enthusiasm that defied all logic. She was supposed to be suffering. She was supposed to be focusing on her own survival, not engaging in social activities with alien children. "This is temporary," Grix insisted, though his confidence was developing some alarming cracks. "Once the physical strain kicks in, she'll stop playing games." But something even stranger was happening. Beth's pace wasn't slowing down. If anything, she seemed to be moving with more energy than before, chatting with the cubs as they worked together to transport stones from the quarry to the processing area. "Sir," Tim ventured, "the cubs are actually contributing meaningful weight now. Each trip, they're collectively carrying maybe 15 pounds of stone between them." 15 pounds? Grix's mandibles clicked in disbelief. That's actually helping her meet quota." "Yes, sir. And there are more cubs coming." Indeed, the original 3 had been joined by 2 more, and these newer additions were carrying progressively larger stones. What had started as a curious game was evolving into something that looked suspiciously like organized cooperation. "How is she doing this?" Grix demanded. "Cubs don't help prisoners. Cubs barely help their own parents with household chores. They're not programmed for this kind of behavior." "Maybe she's not a typical prisoner, sir." Grix shot his aide a look that could have melted hull plating. "She's human. They're weak, selfish, and focused entirely on individual survival. This is documented fact." But the evidence contradicted the documentation. Beth was now leading a convoy of 5 Korvan cubs up and down the quarry path, and they were actually singing some kind of work song that had them all marching in rhythm. The translator was having trouble with the melody, but the words seemed to be about teamwork and friendship, and helping each other achieve impossible goals. "Sir, the cubs are carrying nearly 30 pounds of stone per trip now," Tim reported, his voice filled with something approaching awe. "Between their contributions and Beth's loads, they're exceeding standard quota by 20%. 20%. Grix stared at the screens showing impossible scenes of interspecies cooperation in his carefully designed punishment facility. A human prisoner who should have been broken by now was instead leading a team of volunteer assistants who seemed to be having the time of their lives. "Get me a direct communication line to the quarry," he ordered. "Sir? I want to hear what she's saying to them. There has to be some kind of manipulation involved. Humans don't inspire loyalty through genuine kindness. It's not in their psychological profile." The audio feed crackled to life, filling the office with the sounds of Beth's voice mixing with the excited chatter of young Korvan cubs. But instead of manipulation or coercion, Grix heard something that made his secondary stomachs knot with confusion. "That's perfect, Pip," Beth was saying, apparently addressing the smallest cub. "You're getting so strong. Soon you'll be able to carry the big stones just like the older cubs." The little cub Pip apparently chirped with pride and scrambled to find an even bigger rock to contribute. "And Zek, excellent teamwork helping Knox with that heavy piece. You two make a great team." The 2 cubs in question practically glowed with happiness at the praise. "This is impossible," Grix muttered. "She's a prisoner. She should be focused on her own survival, not building up the self-esteem of alien children." But Beth Carter seemed to have missed that memo entirely. She was treating the cubs like valued partners, celebrating their contributions, offering encouragement when they struggled with heavier stones, and generally behaving like someone who found joy in helping others succeed. "Sir," Tim said quietly, "you should see this." The newest addition to Beth's team was a cub who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, barely out of infancy by Korvan standards. It was struggling with a stone that was clearly too heavy, its little arms shaking with effort. Instead of ignoring the struggling youngling or telling it to find a smaller rock, Beth set down her own load and knelt beside the cub. She helped it lift the stone, supporting most of the weight while letting the little one feel like it was contributing meaningfully to their shared effort. Teamwork, she said gently. Sometimes we all need a little help. That's what friends are for. The cub's eyes filled with adoration, and it pressed close to Beth's side as they walked up the quarry path together. Friends, Grix repeated, his voice hollow with disbelief. She called them friends. Sir, there are now 12 cubs participating in the stone-carrying operation, Tim reported. They've organized themselves into an efficient assembly line. Beth's quota is being met by a factor of 3, and every single cub involved is exhibiting behaviors we've never documented before. Grix watched his carefully designed punishment system transform into something that looked more like a community project. Beth Carter, who should have been broken and demoralized by now, was instead building bridges between species through the simple act of treating alien children with respect and kindness. Alert the facility psychiatrist, Grix ordered, his voice tight with frustration. I want a full psychological evaluation of this human. There has to be some kind of mind control involved. Sir, Dr. Velk is already en route, Tim replied. She heard about the situation through facility communications and insisted on observing personally. Dr. Velk arrived within minutes, her tall, angular frame moving with the precise gait of someone accustomed to analyzing impossible situations. Her species had evolved specifically for psychological analysis, with sensory organs capable of detecting emotional states, pheromone changes, and neural activity patterns from significant distances. Fascinating, she murmured, settling beside Grix's desk and focusing her attention on the quarry feeds. Show me the baseline readings from when she started. Tim pulled up the data streams, displaying Beth's initial biometric readings alongside the cub's behavioral patterns. Standard human stress markers at the beginning, elevated but within normal parameters for a prisoner facing hard labor. And now, her stress levels have actually decreased. Heart rate is steady, muscle tension is relaxed, and brain activity shows patterns consistent with enjoyment. Dr. Velk's specialized eyes widened. Enjoyment of hard labor? That's biologically impossible for most species. What about the cubs? Even stranger, Doctor. They're exhibiting pack-bonding behaviors with the human, but also with each other across family lines. Cubs from different clans are working together without territorial disputes. Through the audio feed, they could hear Beth teaching the cubs a counting song in both human language and broken Korvan phrases. The little ones were repeating her words enthusiastically, their high voices creating a melody that somehow made the backbreaking work sound like a celebration. 1 big stone, 2 big stones, 3 big stones more. Working together, helping each other. That's what friends are for. She's creating cultural fusion, Dr. Velk observed, her voice filled with scientific amazement. Blending human musical traditions with Korvan linguistic patterns to establish shared identity markers. In standard galactic, please, Grix demanded. She's teaching them to be a team by giving them songs to sing together. It's elementary social psychology, but I've never seen it applied across species barriers with such immediate effectiveness. Any fix. The situation in the quarry had evolved beyond simple cooperation. The cubs had divided themselves into specialized roles. Scouts who identified the best stones, carriers who transported loads, and cheerleaders who encouraged everyone with enthusiastic chirping. Beth moved among them like a conductor directing an orchestra, offering guidance and praise while contributing her own substantial efforts. Sir, Tim's voice cracked, with nervous energy. We have a new development. Adult Korvan staff members are starting to gather around the quarry perimeter. Indeed, a growing crowd of facility employees had abandoned their posts to watch the unprecedented spectacle. Guards, maintenance workers, kitchen staff, and administrative personnel all stood mesmerized by the sight of their own youngsters, working in perfect harmony with a human prisoner. This is turning into a public disturbance, Grix muttered, but his heart wasn't in the complaint. He was too busy trying to process what he was witnessing. Actually, sir, Doctor, Velk interjected, I think this represents something much more significant than a disturbance. Watch the cubs' parents. The adult Korvans weren't just observing. They were showing clear signs of pride and amazement as they watched their offspring demonstrate unprecedented levels of cooperation and initiative. Several parents were pointing excitedly, obviously discussing their cubs' newfound abilities. The human isn't just affecting the youngsters, Dr. Vell continued. She's creating positive behavioral changes that are spreading throughout the social network. The parents are proud of what their cubs are accomplishing, which reinforces the cub's desire to continue the behavior. You're saying she's accidentally restructuring our entire family social dynamic? Grix asked weakly. I'm saying she's doing it on purpose, though she probably doesn't realize the full implications. Through the feed, they watched Beth pause in her work to help a particularly small cub who had tripped while carrying a stone. She brushed off the little one's fur, checked for injuries, and then gave it a gentle hug before helping it select a more manageable load. The gesture was so natural, so instinctively caring, that several watching parents made soft sounds of approval. Sir, Tim whispered, I think we need to consider that our assessment of human psychology might be fundamentally flawed. Grix stared at the screens, showing his maximum security detention facility, transforming into something resembling a community center, complete with singing, teamwork, and what appeared to be genuine affection between a human prisoner and alien children. Sir, Tim's voice was barely above a whisper. What do we do now? They made the human carry stones. The cubs carried stones beside her part too. The answer to Tim's question arrived in the form of Administrator Krek, bursting through Grix's office door like a hurricane with anger management issues. His massive bulk filled the doorway, and his 6 arms were gesticulating wildly in patterns that typically preceded someone getting fired into the nearest star. Explain, Krek rumbled, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made smart people reconsider their life choices. Why my maximum security facility has been transformed into what appears to be an interspecies daycare center. Sir, the human prisoner has somehow, Grix began. The human prisoner has somehow convinced our cubs to voluntarily participate in hard labor while singing songs about friendship. Do you understand how that sounds to the Detention Authority Board? Dr. Vell cleared her throat diplomatically. Administrator. From a psychological perspective, this represents a breakthrough in interspecies behavioral modification that could revolutionize our entire approach to… Doctor, Krek interrupted with the patience of someone explaining basic physics to a particularly slow asteroid. I don't care if she's discovered the secret to eternal happiness. She's a prisoner. This is a detention facility. Those cubs should be playing with toys, not hauling construction materials. Through the office windows, they could all see that Beth's influence had expanded beyond the original dozen cubs. At least 20 youngsters were now involved in the operation, and they had somehow convinced 3 teenage Korvans to join their efforts. The adolescents were carrying significantly heavier loads while engaging in what appeared to be spirited debate about optimal stone selection techniques. The teenagers are treating it like a competitive sport, Tim observed nervously. They're trying to impress the human with their strength while simultaneously protecting the smaller cubs from overexertion. Impossible, Administrator Krek declared. Korvan teenagers don't cooperate with authority figures. They especially don't engage in voluntary physical labor. It's biologically contrary to adolescent psychology. But the evidence was right there on the screens. The teenage Korvans were not only working, they were working harder than anyone had expected, driven by some incomprehensible desire to earn Beth's approval and protect their younger siblings. Sir, came a new voice from the doorway. Security Chief Rock stood at attention, her usual military bearing somewhat compromised by the expression of someone who had witnessed reality perform an illegal U-turn. We have a situation in the general population wing. Please tell me it's something normal, Grix pleaded. A riot would be refreshing at this point. The other prisoners are requesting transfer to stone quarry duty. The silence that followed this announcement was so complete that they could hear the facility's life support systems humming. Come again? Administrator Krek asked weakly. Every single prisoner currently assigned to other duties has filed formal requests to be transferred to stone quarry work. They claim they want to learn from the humans' methods. Dr. Velk's specialized eyes dilated with scientific fascination. She's created a behavioral cascade effect. The positive social dynamics she established with the cubs are being observed and desired by the adult prison population. You're telling me, Krek said slowly, that prisoners are volunteering for the hardest job assignment because they want to work with the human who made that assignment desirable? That appears to be the situation. Yes, sir. Through the communication feed, They could hear Beth addressing her expanded team with the same patience and enthusiasm she had shown the original Cubs. But now, she was teaching older participants about proper lifting techniques, load distribution, and injury prevention. Remember, everyone, we're stronger when we work smart, not just hard. Next. Can you show little Kip how you're balancing that load? Perfect. See how much easier it is when your back stays straight? The teenage Korvan named Nex practically glowed with pride at being asked to demonstrate proper technique, while little Kip absorbed the lesson with the focused attention of someone learning from a trusted teacher. She's created a mentorship hierarchy, Dr. Velk breathed. The older participants feel valued for their knowledge and experience, while the younger ones feel supported and guided. It's textbook community building. Textbook insanity, Administrator Kreck corrected. Dr. Velk, I need you to determine how she's doing this. Mind control, pheromone manipulation, subliminal audio frequencies, something that can be documented and countered. Sir, I've been monitoring her biometric output continuously. There are no unusual electromagnetic signatures, no chemical secretions, no subsonic vocalizations. She's using nothing but standard verbal communication and behavioral modeling. That's impossible. Nobody inspires voluntary cooperation through simple kindness, especially not prisoners. But even as Kreck spoke, the screens showed Beth helping a struggling adult prisoner learn to coordinate with a team of cubs. The prisoner, a burly Grondarian convicted of violent assault, was accepting instruction from a human barely half his size, with the meekness of a student eager to please a favorite teacher. Sir, Security Chief Rox added reluctantly, the prison staff are requesting permission to observe the operation more closely. Several guards have asked if they can assist with supervision. Supervision of what? It's the most peaceful work detail in facility history. What do they need to supervise? They want to learn her methods, sir, for application in other areas of the facility. Administrator Kreck sat down heavily in the nearest chair, his 6 arms drooping with the weight of administrative impossibility. We have created a situation where prisoners volunteer for hard labor, staff request additional duties, and alien children organize themselves into efficient work teams. Does anyone else see the problem with this scenario? Actually, sir, Tim ventured, productivity in the quarry has increased by 400% since this morning. At current rates, we'll complete the entire contracted stone extraction project 3 weeks ahead of schedule. 3 weeks ahead of schedule, Kreck repeated. A project that was originally estimated to take 6 months. Yes, sir. The efficiency improvements are unprecedented. Through the audio feed, they could hear Beth leading the entire group in a new song. This one apparently about the satisfaction of completing difficult tasks through teamwork. The melody was infectious enough that several observing adults were unconsciously humming along. Administrator, Dr. Velk said quietly, I recommend we document this phenomenon rather than attempting to stop it. We're witnessing something that could fundamentally change our understanding of motivation, cooperation, and rehabilitation. Rehabilitation? Kreck's voice climbed to frequencies that probably violated several interspecies communication protocols. She's a prisoner, not a therapist. She's both, sir, whether she realizes it or not. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another figure in the doorway. Director Hax, from the Galactic Correction Authority, her official uniform indicating this was no casual visit. Administrator Kreck, she said with the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Instantly. I've received 17 reports about unusual activities at your facility. Care to explain why my communication systems are flooded with requests for detailed behavioral analysis reports? Director, we have a unique prisoner situation that has created some unexpected efficiency improvements. Efficiency improvements? Director Hax moved to the observation windows, her attention immediately drawn to the quarry operation. Is that human prisoner organizing voluntary labor teams? Yes, ma'am. With children? Yes, ma'am. And they're singing? Yes, ma'am. Director Hax watched in silence for several minutes as Beth demonstrated proper teamwork techniques to a mixed-age group that included prisoners, cubs, teenagers, and now several adult volunteers from the facility staff. The operation ran with the smooth precision of a military unit, but with an atmosphere of joy that defied every known principle of correctional management. How long has this been going on? She asked finally. Since this morning, Director. And you've verified that she's using no artificial enhancements, no technological aids, no psychological manipulation techniques beyond standard social interaction? Confirmed, ma'am. She's accomplishing this through what appears to be natural human behavioral patterns. Director Hax was quiet for another long moment, her expression cycling through disbelief, fascination, and what might have been the early stages of existential dread. Administrator Kreck. I'm implementing an immediate facility-wide behavioral study. I want every interaction documented, every social dynamic analyzed, and a complete report on my desk within 72 hours. Ma'am? If Beth Carter can transform a maximum security detention facility into a voluntary cooperation center using nothing but kindness and work songs, then we need to completely reevaluate our entire approach to criminal rehabilitation. Through the windows, they watched Beth pause in her work to bandage a minor scrape on a cub's paw, the little one accepting her care with absolute trust while its parents watched approvingly from the observation area. Furthermore, Director Hax continued, I'm authorizing the immediate implementation of similar programs at facilities throughout the sector. If human prisoners can generate these results, we need to understand how and why. You're suggesting we use prisoners as rehabilitation coordinators? Administrator Kreck asked weakly. I'm suggesting that sometimes the inmates know more about creating functional communities than the administrators do. As if summoned by their conversation, Beth's voice carried clearly through the communication system as she addressed her expanded team of volunteers, prisoners, cubs, and staff members. All right, everyone. We've made incredible progress today. Let's finish strong. And remember, the stones we're moving aren't just building materials. They're the foundation of something better, something we're all creating together. The response was a cheer that included voices from multiple species, age groups, and social classifications, united in enthusiasm for completing a job that had started as punishment and evolved into purpose. Director. Doctor, Velk said softly. I believe we're witnessing the emergence of a new model for social rehabilitation, one that treats behavioral change as a community effort rather than an individual punishment. Director Hax nodded slowly, and it took a human prisoner to show us what we've been missing all along. As the day shift wound down, Beth organized the cleanup efforts with the same patient efficiency she had brought to everything else. Cubs sorted tools, while teenagers moved equipment, and adult volunteers swept the work areas clean. The entire operation proceeded with the smooth coordination of a group that had been working together for years rather than hours. Sir, Tim said quietly, the betting pools are requesting guidance on how to process the results. What results? Grix asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know. Nobody bet on voluntary cooperation and increased productivity. The entire gambling system has collapsed because the outcome was too positive to predict. Administrator Kreck looked at his staff, at the screens showing impossible scenes of harmony and productivity, and at the reports flooding in from facilities across the sector requesting information about the human method. Gentlemen, he said finally, I think we're going to need a much larger office. Outside in the quarry, Beth Carter finished her first day of hard labor by teaching a mixed-species group of children a lullaby about friendship that transcended the stars. And somewhere in the administrative offices above, an entire civilization was beginning to realize that their understanding of human nature might have been just slightly, fundamentally, completely wrong. Sir, Tim announced, his voice trembling with the kind of excitement typically reserved for discovering new forms of mathematics. We're receiving priority communications from detention facilities in 12 different sectors. They're all reporting similar phenomena with their human prisoners. Similar how? Administrator Kreck asked, though his tone suggested he was bracing for another reality-defying revelation. Facility Omega-7 reports their human prisoner has convinced the kitchen staff to implement nutritional improvement programs that have reduced medical complaints by 70%. Facility Delta-3 says their human organize the inmates into study groups that have achieved unprecedented educational advancement scores. Doctor. Velk's sensory organs were practically vibrating with scientific enthusiasm. It's not isolated to Beth Carter. This appears to be a species-wide behavioral pattern. Humans instinctively create cooperative communities wherever they're placed. Even in maximum security prisons designed specifically to prevent cooperation. Director Hax observed dryly. Especially in maximum security prisons, Dr. Velk corrected. The more challenging the environment, the more pronounced their community-building responses become. Through the communication feed, they could hear Beth organizing the end-of-shift cleanup with the same patient efficiency she brought to everything else. But now the cleanup included not just the original work team, but dozens of volunteer participants from across the facility. Tomorrow, we'll start working on the foundation stones for the new meditation garden, she was explaining to an enthusiastic audience. I know it sounds like extra work, but gardens have this wonderful way of bringing people together. Plus, the Cubs have some amazing ideas about design features that I think everyone will love. Meditation garden. A prisoner was planning construction projects for the facility's improvement, and everyone involved was treating it like the most natural thing in the universe. Sir, Security Chief Rox reported, I've completed the analysis of today's security incidents. How bad is it? Krek asked wearily. There weren't any, sir. 0 disciplinary actions, 0 conflicts, 0 medical emergencies. It's the first incident-free day in facility history. That's impossible. We house 300 inmates from 17 different species with documented aggression issues. Yes, sir. But apparently, watching the quarry operation has had a calming effect on the entire population. Inmates are resolving disputes through discussion, sharing resources voluntarily, and several have started cleaning their quarters without being ordered. Administrator Krek rubbed his temples with 2 of his 6 hands, while the remaining 4 gestured helplessly at the screens. We've created a correctional facility where the prisoners are more civilized than most free citizens. Sir, Tim ventured nervously. There's something else. The Cubs' parents are requesting permission to extend family visit hours so their children can continue participating in Beth's programs. The parents want their children to spend more time with a convicted criminal? They want their children to learn from her, sir. Several families have formally petitioned to make Beth an honorary community educator. Dr. Velk nodded approvingly. Classic human social integration pattern. She's not being viewed as an outsider or threat anymore. She's being accepted as a valued community member, despite her official status. Through the windows, they watched Beth saying goodnight to each cub individually, offering personal encouragement about their contributions and expressing enthusiasm for tomorrow's projects. The little ones clustered around her like she was a beloved family member, their parents watching with expressions of profound gratitude. Director, Administrator Krek said quietly, what exactly are we supposed to do with a prisoner who has accidentally solved every behavioral problem our facility was designed to address? Director Hax was quiet for a long moment, watching Beth wave goodbye to the last of the Cubs before being escorted back to her cell by guards who were chatting with her like old friends. Administrator, she said finally, I think it's time we admitted that our entire approach to criminal justice has been fundamentally backwards. We've been trying to break people down to build them back up, when apparently all we needed to do was give them something meaningful to build together. You're recommending we restructure the entire galactic correctional system based on one human's behavior patterns? I'm recommending we learn from success instead of perpetuating failure. As night fell over the facility, the usual sounds of unrest and conflict were replaced by something unprecedented. The quiet murmur of inmates reading together, playing cooperative games, and discussing plans for tomorrow's community projects. And in her cell, Beth Carter was probably planning new songs to teach the Cubs, completely unaware that she had just revolutionized criminal justice theory across 17 star systems. Gentlemen, Director Hax concluded, I think we're about to discover that humans don't just adapt to whatever environment they're placed in, they transform it.